Spider-Man, the second biggest superhero of all time, the de facto mascot of Marvel Studios, and the 13th highest grossing media franchise on the planet. And like most of my fellow Gen Z, my first interaction with Webhead was the legendary Sam Raimi trilogy. But as I've grown up, I've come to learn about a small but vocal minority of fans who hate these movies. In fact, they hate all of the live-action Spider-Man movies, because they're not true to his comic book roots. Roots which, I may add, go back to the Kennedy administration, and hell, even before my time, it was before my parents' time either. So, I've decided to make my way through the comic history of our favorite web-slinger, and what better place to start than with the first 5 issues of The Amazing Spider-Man. The first ever appearance of Spider-Man actually predates his own series with Amazing Fantasy number 15, so we're doing a bonus round to start. Spider-Man's origins begin with the first of many fourth wall breaks. You see, while Batman had just this little preamble at the beginning, Spider-Man has a huge blurb of writers essentially giving you their elevator pitch for long underwear characters. Well, now we can actually start the story, and we've got some pretty boilerplate content on Peter's origins and what did they do to my guy. And because this is not only my first comic from the Silver Age, my first interaction with Spider-Man on the page, but also just my second comic ever, I decided to pay a visit to my local comic book shop and get their advice. And this angel of a woman there warned me 2 things about going into it. Number 1, the writing. Stan Lee is unquestionably great in the history of comics, but man, some of this writing is just insane. I'll circle back on this a few times, but take this moment he gets bit by the spider, right? Let's look at this panel, even erasing all of your pre-existing Spider-Man knowledge. I think you get the idea. Well, here's what the full panel looks like. And that brings me to my first observation. There is no subtlety in any of these issues. This panel specifically made me feel like I was watching anime, and while I do think I got used to it later on, I think that's definitely an acquired taste. So Peter enters this competition to win some money in a fight, and I'm actually pretty shocked how accurate the Sam Raimi movies have been so far. Although, coming from Batman Year One, this art is pretty atrocious. I do think it has some charm to it, but really that's the best thing I can say about it. Well, next up on Peter's to-do list is to make his spider suit, and okay, so the webs do not come out of his arms, good to know. And then after one of his TV appearances, he sees this man running from a cop, and the cop's like, "Stop, please, help me apprehend this dangerous criminal." And Peter's like, "No." So he escapes through the elevator, and the cop's like, "Oh, I ought to bring you in." Like, what? These issues have such a weird relationship with cops, it's very hard to explain. Then Uncle Ben dies. Off page, and Peter's like, I gotta go take this guy down, I gotta get revenge, which he just does incredibly easily because, hey, he's Spider-Man. But it's revealed that the guy who kills Uncle Ben was the guy from earlier that Peter let get away. I don't know if I'm just way behind the curve because I did not know this, and I love it because having Peter share in the blame of Uncle Ben's death makes the "with great power comes great responsibility" speech really ring home. Hey, wait a minute, speaking of that iconic Uncle Ben speech, if they killed him off page, then... Oh, okay, so it's just narrated by Stan at the end? Oh, that's so lame for something so iconic. But I gotta say, the origin is unchanged, and for good reason. Such a clear rationale to me as to why this character was such an instant success is his relatability. Like, yeah, he still has this tragedy, but the later issues I've read don't really bring that up, and I think smartly choose to focus on everyone just shitting on Peter, and having a superhero be a teenage outcast in a time in America where being a teenage outcast was kind of a big thing really makes Peter feel significantly more human than a lot of those other long underwear wearing folks. The issue closes with another letter from the editor, but this one's actually really cute. They talk about how they need to make less frequent comics to maintain quality. They thank the fans, they thank them for their letters, and they even thank a bunch of fans by name specifically at the bottom, and I just love the idea of someone's grandparent being immortalized like this. Now, while I will do a collective score, I'm also going to do a little tier list for each issue because, as you'll see, the quality varies a lot. So, should a modern reader come back to this, where do I put Spider-Man's very first appearance? I think it's an A-tier comic. I think it's carried, yes, by its historical significance, but it's also only 11 pages long, and for the amount it gets across and some of the cute charm, yeah, I think it's worth it. So what about the next issue? Spider-Man number 1, technically. Does it continue the momentum? Well, kinda. After a quick recap of the last issue, we open up on Aunt May struggling to pay rent. And this brings me to probably the most surprising thing about these first few issues. Spider-Man only cares about money so much, and I mean so much, of very early Spider-Man are just ways Peter can make money. And I thought initially it would be like before he learns his lesson once Uncle Ben dies, but no, it's pretty much everywhere. And yeah, I get that he needs to pay rent and they don't have a steady income now, but it's just too real, man. I gotta worry about paying my own rent. And I don't want to hear about Spider-Man's search for cash flow. So after briefly thinking about just stealing the money, Peter's like, okay, I gotta start performing. So after the host is like, okay, let me give you a check. Who should I make it out to? And Peter's like, make it out to Spider-Man. And then he fucking tries to cash it in costume. And then Teller's like, obviously not. You need a social security number, Spider-Man. We are like 3 pages in and we are talking social security numbers. So they just do not make them like they used to. But as Spider-Man goes back to do another show the next night, he learns it's been shut down because someone has been slandering Spider-Man's good name. And I'm happy to say we are meeting the best character in any of these issues, J. Jonah Jameson. Triple J gets some more time to shine later down, so I'll talk more about him then, but for now he's like, Spider-Man's a menace. These young kids should have real heroes like my son, the astronaut. Long story short, Peter saves Jonah's son, but still faces some bad press, lack of job prospects, and the issue ends. But thankfully, it's a 2-parter. So Peter Palmer, okay, I guess they just gotta keep you on your toes. So Palmer thinks that if he joins the Fantastic Four, surely they can pay him for his time. Oh, why are we still talking about money? So Spider-Man's genius plan is to break into the Fantastic Four's headquarters and tries to 1v4 them to be like, see guys, don't you want me in your group? My starting salary is 100k plus benefits. The Fantastic Four are like, bro, we're not for profit. We don't make salaries. It goes back to science or whatever. And then Peter's like, well, fuck, I didn't want to join anyway. I'll make you all look like pikers. Wait, am I allowed to say that? Okay, I'm good. This is just too good, man. I actually did enjoy this fight too. Well, we finally get a break from all this money talk and see our first original Spider-Man supervillain, the Chameleon, who wants to steal some missile plans to give to the Iron Curtain countries. And he does have a much better plan than Spider-Man, so he contacts Peter through the Force and is like, meet me at this location, right? But then he morphs into Spider-Man and steals the plans, even equipped with a little fake web shooter. And as he leaves, Peter shows up and foils his plan, chases him out of his little Soviet helicopter into this building, where he again tries to change into a cop before finally being apprehended. I specifically really like this moment with the Fantastic Four at the end, where they contemplate how dangerous Peter could be if he gets corrupted, which in this version of Peter, I definitely think could be. I haven't read any Fantastic Four stuff, so this definitely made me want to go check them out. So after our cute message from Spider-Man thanking the fans, it's time to rank this, and it's tough, because the first part with the money was like D tier, but the Chameleon and the Fantastic Four stuff was probably closer to S, so honestly, I will average them out and put issue number 1 in B tier. But now I have to discuss the second thing my comic book aficionado warned me about, the stories. Since this is the run that cemented a cultural behemoth, it is natural that it might seem a bit villain of the month material, since it literally was that. So the reason I say this now is I am not going to have as much to say about these next few issues, since they really feel like a Saturday morning cartoon, and I don't necessarily say that as a bad thing. There is definitely an element of comfort about these issues, but without any more delay, let's talk about Spider-Man issue number 2. The tough part about these issues is the art is still unremarkable, the writing is still too wordy, but now we don't have as many interesting character moments. But thankfully, this issue is just hilarious. Ah, it's the Vulture! He stole my briefcase with a fortune in bonds! Help! So Peter gets an idea. He, as Spider-Man, can work at the Daily Bugle to make money off of selling photos of the Vulture, which is just wrong on so many levels. On the one hand, it's a really cool dynamic for Peter to work with the guy who hates his guts without even knowing it, but on the other hand, it makes Spider-Man's motivation in a lot of these to just make money first and stop the villains second. So after some hijinks, Peter sells the photos and the Vulture steals some diamonds. So Peter's like, let me suit up to take more pictures. Fight ensues, Spider-Man wins with a MacGuffin and sells more pictures, enough to pay for a full year of rent and the newest kitchen appliances. I like how not only Aunt May doesn't question it, and speaking of Aunt May, she has pretty much no role in any of these issues, so I hope they actually use her later on. But thankfully, much like the last issue, this is a 2-parter, and our next villain is the Tinkerer, and already we are off to a much better start because Peter is finally doing something out of the goodness of his heart. I specifically really really like this because everyone is just so mean in this universe, and when we finally meet this nice scientist guy, it's such a relief because finally someone outside of Aunt May has some actual human decency. So Peter takes the scientist's radio to get repaired since he's helping out with this experiment, and all the owners like, oh, I'll get it for you, and he goes down into the store basement, which has a bunch of aliens in it. This is page 3, by the way. And I'm not surprised aliens exist like they do in the MCU, but I am surprised they do it this early on. And while I will continue to criticize the writing, I do have to give it props because I would say I've really enjoyed all of the villains' plans thus far. Either they've been smart like the chameleons or just hilarious like the vultures. And I think the Tinkerer is pretty cool. I mean, Stan is basically describing what would become a computer virus except to radios in the 60s. So we get a cool moment where Peter finds the device, so he goes back, beats up some aliens, and I will say, with each issue, the action is definitely improving. The aliens are like, no way we can invade Earth now, and the issue ends. Now to tier it, and much like the last one, this is the tale of two halves, where I think the Tinkerer is a lot more interesting than the Vulture, although I would say it averages out to probably about the middle of the pack. Alright, halfway done, and our next villain is the esteemed Dr. Octopus. And this is just a pet peeve, but this is like the second or third time an issue begins with, well, a story has got to start somewhere, and I'm like, yeah, it does. So we get the standard Doc Ock origin of his experiment gone wrong, and I'm happy to say that 73 pages in, I have finally found a panel with art I genuinely enjoyed. Meanwhile, J. Jonah Jameson's like, Peter, you gotta take pictures. Peter's like, bet. So of course, I'm still kind of pissed that his main motivation for going at Doc Ock is to take pictures, but I can't complain about it every time it comes up from now on. So in a first, Spider-Man gets his ass beat, so the governor calls in the Fantastic Four, but they're busy, so they can only spare the Human Torch, but he needs a few days off because he's been using his flame too much. So naturally, while Doc Ock takes over an atomic facility, he goes to Peter's high school to give a pep talk, and he's like, never give up, and Peter's like, holy shit, I get it now. I just can't give up. Oh my goodness. If you ask me, this was a perfect moment to have Aunt May or even like an Uncle Ben flashback to speak to Peter, but instead we have the Human Torch showing flaming numbers. I don't know if I'm just a dumb Gen Zer, but what is this, a fraction? I don't understand this. So Spider-Man wins in a mid-fight scene to close a mid-issue, and I think this just reads like AI, I'm not gonna lie. And while Doc Ock is cool, this story is just a bowl of nothing, but because we didn't speak of money for a few minutes, it's already ahead of the Vulture issue. Now, our next villain is the Sandman. And I have good news and I have bad news. Bad news, this issue is basically the same and has no differences story-wise. The good news is it's really funny though. So let's rapid fire through this issue, shall we? Number 1, Spider-Man talks like Gex. Yeah, and this is a weird one. Spider-Man definitely has the reputation of being a quippy hero, but he does this weird thing like 3 times, and it just feels like a Family Guy cutaway, but without the cutaway. Number 2, Spider-Man also gets scorned by a cop for violating these burglars' constitutional rights. Number 3, this panel, but also he can change his body as easily as Mr. Fantastic. Mr. Fantastic, famous leader of the Fabulous Fantastic Four. Aunt May selling shoelaces for 10 cents?
This is ridiculous. I am no cotton picking seamstress.
Alright, I've lost track of this. So Sandman is on the run and happens to take shelter in Peter's high school. He goes up to the principal, who's just a complete badass in this, and is like, well, maybe I should get my diploma because I never graduated. And the principal's like, fuck off. And then Sandman's like, no, actually, that's exactly what I want. I want the diploma, please. They fight, and Spider-Man vacuums Sandman to win. The last thing I want to say about this issue is that we get some more interesting characterization about J. Jonah Jameson and his weird grudge and how he's slowly turning society against Spider-Man. And I think other than having Peter work for him, which was a brilliant idea, he really stands out in these early issues because he's the one villain so far Spider-Man can't punch. In a way, he's scarier because his powers aren't super, they're political and societal. So where should we put issue number 4? Well, story-wise, it's pretty basic, but some of the conflicts definitely got a little bit more intriguing, and this one is just too damn funny. B tier. Well, now we have finally made it to the last issue in this video, Amazing Spider-Man number 5, featuring the famous Dr. Doom. Now, I don't even know what Dr. Doom's powers are. I really know nothing about the guy, so I'm really interested to read my very first material on the character. We start off seeing the impacts of the last few issues, and that the Daily Bugle is slowly turning the world against Spider-Man in a pretty noticeable way. And while we have been and continue to see this mainly through Peter's friends at school, Dr. Dr. Doom notices and is like, hey, maybe this guy who's supposedly such a menace to society can team up with me to take down the Fantastic Four. Also, I really wasn't expecting this much Fantastic Four stuff. A majority of these issues so far have some aspects intertwined, and I just think that's pretty neat. So Doom uses the Force to call Spider-Man to make his offer, and Spider-Man's like, hell no, so Doom blows up the whole place and escapes, which JJJ immediately tries to pin on Spider-Man. And already here, the action is another step up, and it could be that I've just gotten used to it, but I do think the writing is a lot less wordy than it used to be. Next, we have my favorite piece of story thus far. We pan to Spider-Man in front of some kids, but it's not Peter, it's Flash Thompson, dressed up as Spider-Man to prank Peter. I haven't really spoken about Flash so far. Basically, he's just a pretty copy-paste bully, but at the same time he's doing this, Dr. Doom moves onto his plan B, and he has like 6 backup plans in this issue, but if he can't convince Spider-Man to join him, he's gonna kidnap him and use him as a hostage until the Fantastic Four come to rescue him. So Doom has this MacGuffin that's a radar to Peter's radioactive DNA. Only issue is Flash Thompson is right next to Peter, dressed up as Spider-Man, so he ends up getting captured instead. And because this is like one of my favorite story tropes, I'm gonna ignore how his spidey senses didn't go off in this moment. So Doom does his broadcast and Peter puts together that it's Flash, but he has this incredibly off-character scene where he's like, maybe I should just let him die. I can't really diss this Peter Parker as not being authentic because by definition this is the authentic Peter Parker, but I just don't think a hero should even have this thought go through his head. Like, yeah, Flash is a dick, but he's not a supervillain. So the real Spider-Man breaks in and they have probably for sure the best fight so far, and Dr. Doom is pretty close to actually winning when he sees the Fantastic Four finally show up, so he wisely dips. I really liked what I saw from Dr. Doom and definitely want to read more of his stuff. If you know of any great standalone stories, please drop me some recs. And now the best issue ends with Flash being a little punk and pretending he wasn't scared shitless. Gosh, Flash, this will really make you the BMOC, Big Man on Campus. Best issue by a mile, S tier. Well, that's Spider-Man's first 6 issues, and while I would definitely recommend Amazing Fantasy number 15, which is Peter's origin, and Amazing Spider-Man number 5 with Dr. Doom, the rest ranged from mid to forgettable. I think there is a lot of charm to be found in these, but aside from their humor, I would say you can skip most of it. 5 out of 10. In addition to working 50 hours a week at my full-time job, videos like these take a long time to make, so I would really appreciate if you enjoyed this type of content that you subscribe, and let me know what other comics I should read to dive deeper into the medium. Next up, I'm going to be reading George Perez's Wonder Woman series.